All right. Don't you love it when you have an epiphany? Somewhere in this place is a bottle of Dasani water. I don't know what happened to it, but it's mine. I was walking with it, and now it disappeared. But as I was buying that Dasani water, I realized that for that bottle of water, I was paying more than for a gallon of gasoline the other day. And somebody had to drill that. They had to, of course, buy the land. They had to then set up a drill. They had to pay workers. They had to extract it. They had to ship it. They had to refine it. They had to then take it to the gas station, and I had to buy it. And so epiphanies are interesting. And I had a photographic epiphany the other day. I teach a lot of classes. As I said, I teach through FGCU, and a lot of communities have me come in season and do classes. And I was doing a class at Pelican Bay. How many Pelican Bay people are there in here? A couple of them. There you go, Dennis, good. And so last week I did a class there on black and white photography. And as I was preparing, of course, I'm studying the masters, I'm studying Ansel, and I'm studying Cartier-Bresson. And after I was going through, you know, you're sitting, you're thinking, it occurred to me something, you know, my main photographic vocation is commercial photography. And so when a guy pays me to come in and shoot his $5 million house that he just bought, you know, he wants those 5 keys. He wants good lighting, he wants good color, he wants good framing so that people know what he's looking at. So when I line up the shot and you look into a room, it leads your eye into the room. And of course it has to be simple. But there is a 6th key that nobody mentions. And it's probably the most important key, and this was my photographic epiphany. The key that's missing in so many photographs, and I'm not going to say whose photographs, but I want you to think about that. Anybody know what that 6th key is?
Emotion.
Well, you saw the thing come up there, that's why you knew that. Yeah, emotion is good, but soul. How many pictures have all those classic things? They're beautifully exposed, great color, great line, great form, great shape, great texture. Everything is perfect, but it leaves you cold. It doesn't do anything to you. It doesn't stir anything in you emotionally. And so, based on that, I said, why not develop a program called storytelling? Okay, yeah, that's working now real well. Okay, or, as I like to subtitle it, every picture tells a story. Now, if you're an old hippie, and I'm sure there are some of you in here, I know some of you back in the 60s, I know what you were doing. You might remember that good old Rod Stewart come out with an album called Every Picture Tells a Story, and on that album was the ever-famous Maggie May. So, you know, I like that idea because it's true. Every picture does tell a story. And what story does it tell? Does it relate to you? So, people have been trying to tell stories through pictures for a heck of a long time. And to the person that did that, and can you still hear me okay? Yep. Yeah. Okay, because I'm hearing myself really loud. Okay, good. To the person that did that and to the people that understood what that was, you know, we're not sure what this foreign figure is back here, but to the people that saw that, they understood it. So visual storytelling has been around for a long time. And again, going back to Cartier-Bresson, Cartier-Bresson says that when we're taking a picture, it's a marvelous mixture of emotion and geometry in a single instant. Remember, he wrote that famous book, The Decisive Moment. So, you know, that's kind of a paraphrase of what he does. So, again, you know, Sonny says, maybe you want to talk about depth of field. If you guys heard another story about depth of field, you'd probably shoot yourself. I know I would. So rather than this being instructional, it's just a collection of thoughts regarding the concept of storytelling that hopes to persuade and inspire you to develop your creativity and to start taking shots that matter, shots that communicate something meaningful to your viewer. Creativity is something we all possess. It's inherent and it doesn't need to be learned the same way the technical side of photography does. The gentleman that has the Olympus camera earlier, he wants to learn that technical side of photography. But he has a creative side, he just needs to know how to apply it to the technical side. So even though you might initially lack the technical and editing expertise, learn to use what you already have, your creativity. The advent of digital photography has certainly revolutionized the way that we take images, bringing unparalleled convenience to our lives. Today, this very day, more than 2 billion pictures are going to be snapped, okay? Certainly more than were done in the first 100 years of photography. And despite all of the benefits of this digital revolution, people don't put as much thought into their shots. They're taking a lot more, but how many are considered true photographs? And because you're here tonight, it's clear that your desire is to create meaningful and powerful images that will stand the test of time. So now you have to ask yourself, what makes that powerful image? So there he is, Cartier-Bresson, and says, photography has not changed since its origin except in technical aspects, which are unimportant to me. So it doesn't matter if you're taking pictures with your cell phone, if you're like Clyde Butcher, you have a 8x10 view camera and you're slogging through the swamp to take your picture, or you're like most of us with a digital camera. It doesn't matter. It's what we're doing. So this is not creativity, okay? Taking pictures of food is not what it's about. Why do we do that? Okay, people do that because they can, okay? And that's unfortunate that that's how most of those 2 million or 2 billion pictures are being used. A powerful image is one that engages and stimulates our hearts and minds. The key to a powerful photograph lies in its ability to tell a story. And a story can be anything from something as complex as social commentary to something as simple as a feeling or an emotion. A storytelling image engages us by speaking to our hearts. It stimulates our inherent curiosity and stirs our creative juices. It leads us not only to question what the photographer is trying to convey, but to explore how we, as the viewer to that photograph, interpret it. So we know this photograph, and you know, it's interesting, the photographer that snapped it, he had no idea what was going to happen a few seconds later. He was there, there's the president, there's the first lady, it's a great story. He's so, you know, it's moving. A few seconds later, another photographer snaps that. And how much different is the interpretation? You know, being there at that position, capturing that angle. And how do we feel about that? We know what's going to happen. We know the story already and how the story ends. And here was somebody there that captures that and the emotion that picture has. A powerful image is a work of art, not of science. So again, don't get hung up on the technical. Don't worry so much about blown out highlights. Don't worry so much about blocked up shadows. If it's a powerful image, it really doesn't matter all that much. As an art form, an image is open to the creativity or imagination. We can fill in. We know that it may be blown out, but we know what's there. We know the shadows may be a little bit muddy, but again, we know what's there. An image speaks to us, and we hear the story we want to hear. The story we choose to hear is determined by a variety of factors, including our values, experiences, culture, society, individualism, and how we view art in general. Most importantly, it's our imagination that influences how we understand and interpret that image. So here, again, a very famous photograph. And how do we see that? Here's a guy looking down the barrel of a gun. And we think, how brave is this man to do that? Now, again, what do we have? We have great line. We have great use of pattern. We have interesting uses of color. Okay? The solitary guy in white there. That the use of that white shirt, almost, is it surrender? So again, he's looking down the barrel of a gun. How do we feel when we look down that barrel of a gun? Again, it's a different emotion. This is like a fear emotion when we see this picture. So just because it's telling a story, we feel differently about it. The world is going to pieces, and people like Adam and Weston are photographing rocks. Okay? So again, the social commentary is what Cartier-Bresson was talking about. Of course they were photographing rocks. That was what they saw. They were doing a beautiful job. But to him, it was nothing. It had no emotion. It had no impact on him. As photographers, we endeavor to communicate a certain story. Although we can carefully compose a scene, it is clear that we lack control over how others are going to interpret our work. Art encourages creative interpretation, unlike science, which is governed by rigid rules and leads us to absolute truths. It is overexposed. It is the wrong white balance. We don't have to worry about that in art. When it comes to art, it can be said that there is no right or wrong interpretation. However, it is clear that interpretation must be reconciled with reason. We have to understand why somebody did a certain thing. As such, it can be said that creative freedom is constrained somewhat by a degree of logic and reason. We live in the real world where creative freedom must coexist with rationality. So here, this photograph was taken by guys who thought they were going to win the war, okay? And so, they're dressed, they're powerful. Here we have a soldier behind the wire, no shirt on, stripped down, his humanity taken away. And so, we have a feeling about these soldiers. And how do we feel about that soldier? That doe-eyed Elvis Presley. We feel, because he's so young, we want to hug him and say, you're going to do well. You'll get through this, So just because it's a story of soldiers, we feel differently based on the photograph and how the photographer chose to do it. Arguably, storytelling is the easiest way to create a powerful image. Creativity is an inherent part of what it means to be human. We all tell stories. We tell stories to our children. As such, our storytelling ability occurs naturally without any rhyme or reason. We make stories up. In contrast, perfecting the technical aspects of photography takes significant time and requires learned understanding. You have to really learn and understand Photoshop to edit that picture the way that you think it should be edited. As photographers, it is important to understand and master the technical, compositional, and post-production aspects of photography. However, when used correctly, these aspects will bring out the story more effectively. It's important to remember that these aspects are only supporting actors that assist in the telling of the story. So if your photograph isn't telling you a good story, no amount of technical expertise or post-production skill is going to save it. So here's a picture, and again, when it was taken, it was just saying, okay, here's beautiful Manhattan, here are the beautiful skyscrapers, and now we look at it and it's kind of, what life was like in a simpler time when we didn't have to worry about, taking our shoes off to get on an airplane, okay? And then the same building, how, the anger and the frustration and the sorrow that we feel when we see pictures like that. Again, the emotion that comes out in a picture like that. Photography is nothing. It's life that interests me. So to Cartier-Bresson, it wasn't so much taking pictures. Remember, he used one camera, Leica M. He used one lens, 50 millimeter, one aperture, one film. And yet he created these powerful, powerful images. This was a Gestapo collaborator in France. And again, great use of composition. Look at that great use of the angles there, that triangle, the expression in those people's faces. Somebody still wearing their uniform from the concentration camp. We all have emotions within us, and a carefully executed photograph elicits emotion that can make us happy, sad, or angry. This is the magic of photos that tell a story. When a person feels an emotion out of a person, thing, or event, the person will hardly be able to forget the specifics. Remember when your first child was born? You know, I can remember 32, 33 years ago now almost, when that happened. You know, or when my father died. You know, those are positive and negative feelings. It's like we lived them yesterday. The same idea holds true when a person sees a photograph. The fun part with a photograph is that it always tells a story, and therefore can be, and there can be multiple stories within a single photograph. It is in the mind of the photographer to direct or channelize the minds of the viewers to a particular story. If somebody is misinterpreting the story, then that photograph has missed its mark. If the photographer is not successful in this endeavor, the photograph loses its distinctiveness and falls under the normal category. And again, we've all taken our share of normal pictures. They're technically good, but they're just good pictures. They're normal. So here, again, a bunch of kids playing. That's a great picture. Great use of color, interesting use of framing. You know, it has a lot of good technical aspects. Action going on. But now, how does this look? So we have a great leading line, a great diagonal line. We have action, we have motion, much more naturally. You know, and the other one, it was all hyped, it was all set up, all of this stuff was put together for these kids. These kids are just enjoying being out in nature, okay? So again, great positioning of the people, great use of backgrounds and things like that. And here are other kids swimming, and how do we feel about that? Why would those kids be playing in wet water? Where did they get those god-awful masks? You know, if this were anywhere in America with little boys and little girls swimming naked, you would have, you know, family and children's services at your house, you know, taking your kids away. So it's all, again, about interpretation and our own emotion to it. So although this topic is closely linked to photojournalism, travel, and street photography, it doesn't have to be related to those fields. You can feel very emotional about a beautiful landscape, a beautiful cityscape, animals relating to one another. It's not necessarily related to that. And everything that happens around us has some sort of a background story linked to it. But you will get better stories when you are in a public place, of course, that is street photography, if you're at a landmark, which is travel photography, or at an event location, photojournalism. Storytelling in itself is very creative. It is difficult to formulate any specific techniques to tell good stories. But definitely there is a structure. You know, we know what Sophia Loren is thinking there, okay? The same holds true for photography. Keep in mind that if you are satisfied with the photograph's capability of embedding a story in your mind, it probably will not have any effect in any other viewer's mind either. As with other properties of storytelling, a photo should comprise one or more of 5 elements. Again, here's 5 more keys to think about, and I'm not going to go through the chant. Mood, emotion, narrative, or ideas or messages. But I will talk about each of those. Mood, and Sonny, just pull out the hook when you need to. Mood. The correct mood can be achieved by experimenting with the background, either by the objects in the background effects or by blurring, by using depth of field. Try different effects or shots. Bring out the mood in the scene by making sure that the background has a relationship with the main subject. The object should be either interlinked to build up the thought process in the viewer in a particular guided path. So that, again, think of that picture of the boat in the lake. We see the boat and our mind kind of travels through that path. For example, if your subject might be a little lost child, the background can be a crowded place where he would be very small. You might just see the child and a lot of adults cut off maybe at the chest and maybe separates him that way. So again, when we're taking pictures, we need to see things. We need to understand light, of course. We need to understand movement. We need to understand composition. But again, it can tell a story. Here's a guy sitting there playing with his phone. Here's another person waiting on a bus. And again, there's activity going on in the picture. Here's another scene where it's a rainy day. Where is the focus? It's not on what's going on outside. That's really the backdrop of what's happening. It's a rainy day, and you're looking out the window, and you're seeing the drops on the window. And here's another view of a window, and we kind of, by her expression, by the way she dressed, by the way she posed, it's kind of telling us a story. It's telling me a story, I know that. Emotion. Use facial expressions if you want your photographs to convey the right emotion. You can also do this by capturing an action performed by your subject. With the lost child example, after showing a close-up of a child's tears, you can show the face streaked with tears, or the eyes so red because of the crying, or the hands with clenched fists. Okay, so again, the emotion. This poor guy, obviously has a problem with one eye, very sullen face, just, we just feel sorry. It's almost like, it is so, it's very moving. It tells a story of a guy who's lived a very hard life. And here, we know it's anger. We know that we're frightened. We would be frightened by this guy if he came up and, we cut him off in a car. It's just very powerful. Okay? We know, oh, see, I got an awe there. And that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to speak to you. The dejected look on the kid's face, and we tell our story. Maybe that kid there pushed it, maybe he took something from it, maybe he said something to make him sad. We tell the story, but yet the picture allows us to relate to that child. And again, the wonderment, the gaze upward, it all brings up that feeling of us that, there's hope, that, youth springs eternal, and so does all those other good things. Okay? And here's another little girl, and how do we feel about her? Obviously she's not as well dressed, obviously she's looking up too, but she doesn't have that anticipation that things are going to be wonderful. And so again, we have that strong emotional connection to her. And, of course, we can get strong expression from animals, too. Not just people, but animals. There's an interesting line. I love black and white, as you might be able to tell. And one of my favorite black and white movies is Psycho. And remember when Norman Bates is with, what's her name, Marion Crane, and they're in the office. And they're talking about taxidermy. And Norman Bates only stuffs birds, and he says, he does birds because birds are very passive, because they don't have the expression, and he would be afraid to do a dog or a chimp. Those are his two examples, a dog or a chimp, because they have so much expression in their faces. And so again, we get those strong expressions. Narration, another part of telling a story. And it comes to life when the viewer can easily visualize what happened before the shot was taken from what is happening in the photograph right now, similar to narrating the story and to demonstrate that flow of events. This can be successfully demonstrated by including or excluding elements into or from your photograph. Again, going back to that idea of cropping. For example, a person talking to someone not in the frame. You see that a lot in television shows where they're talking at somebody who you don't see. Therefore, it's very important to decide what you should include in the frame and what should be excluded in order to leave the viewer's mind to figure out the rest of the story that preceded the moment right before you took the photograph. Generally, the more detailed the photograph is, the more narrative qualities the photograph will possess. So again, we know what happened here because, again, we have the experience. VJ Day, a lot of stuff happening there. Everybody's happy. The sailor grabs the nurse, kisses her. Good story. Here, this again is a Cartier-Bresson story. This little boy, his expression, carrying the big, those two big magnums of wine there, wherever he is going. Notice, again, the good use of depth of field in the picture to isolate and how people are looking at him. They're the backdrop to the story. They tell the narrative of the story. And of course, now we're just left to our imagination. What is she looking at? What is she thinking about? that look out the window is just all about the narration, what happened right before we took the picture. The idea is kind of difficult to illustrate, but if you have something in mind that you want to show to your viewers through a photograph, it shouldn't be that difficult. The key is to already have in mind what you're trying to show. This is this is more demonstrated through abstract photography, which is nothing but a completely different way of looking at something very common. We saw the picture of the feather up real close. Saw a lot of pictures like that where it's not something that we normally see, but yet it creates that idea in our head. For the lost child story, you can use symbolism, perhaps a close-up of a child's tear. Okay, so again, it elicits that emotion. You know, we want to hug that child. It's powerful, and it's very, very simple. Keep it simple, stupid, right? Right, Christine? Right. Okay, again, how do we use that? We could use things like fences to isolate that person. You know, again, it's a visual story. Why is that person on the fence or on the other side of the fence? What does it mean? Or why is this person trying to reach through that there? We're trying to tell a story through an abstract concept, an abstract picture. And lastly, message. The message is the future of what the viewer is currently seeing and conceiving about the photograph. This is often dictated by the theme of the photograph. The theme can be visual. It can be a series of colors or patterns, again, getting back to the idea of color. Style, macro photography, or zoom or panoramic photography. Relationships, the objects in the photo. And location, whether we're in a room, an open space, a market, or a combination of those things. In many famous photographs, the photographer intentionally leaves a lot of things unsettled so that the viewer has an open idea of what's going to happen next. We are left to tell the story. So why is this person in this abandoned building looking out? Are they looking to escape? Are they maybe it's really a dark, sinister thought? Maybe they're going to jump out the window and commit suicide. It's up to us to tell that story. And it creates that idea that we don't know what's going to happen next. Okay? So again, as this skier is trekking across the snow in cross-country skis, you know, are they going to go down the mountain? Are they going to continue up? We don't know. It's up to us to decide what happens next. What happens next? Who's going to pull the trigger? Very, very frightening when we see things like that. It's outside what we consider normal. But yet there, it's very normal. And this was a very famous photograph. And this guy, Kevin Carter, received a lot of flack when this picture was published, because here's that vulture waiting for that child to die. I believe this was in Somalia back in those days. And, you know, they said, you know, why didn't you help that child? You know, and so he received a lot of flack for that. Again, it's that story. It's what's going to happen next. We are left now to fill in the blanks. The key to successful storytelling is to grab the attention of the viewer with the subject and then instantly pass on the idea, message, narration to the viewer so that he or she can feel the same emotion and mood as the photographer felt when present in the actual scene taking the photograph. The work of the photographer then is successful, fulfilling, and truly complete. The creativity of building up a story in a photograph can be a difficult task, but with practice and keeping the above specific structures in mind, you will be able to generate more interesting photos that will be appreciated by your viewers. Okay? Oh, see? And look at the expression. You know, I mean, that could be absolutely a human face. And the way that they cling together there. It is very, very powerful. The fact that it's black and white, that we take the color out of it, that monochrome, makes us look more at what's happening than the colors that are going on in that photograph. Oh, am I still okay, Sonny?
Wrap it up.
Okay, thank you. All right. Tips for doing a photo essay. Now, when you tell a story, it doesn't have to be a single photograph. particularly if you're going traveling, and especially if you're doing things like photo books. I love to do photo books when I travel, to tell my story in photographs, okay? And again, like every story, you need a beginning, a middle, and an end. So, with your photo essay, if you have the interest, passion, and desire to communicate your message, storytelling with the help of photographs isn't going to be difficult for you. Visual storytelling with photographs depends largely on how you want to tell the story, not how others want to see or tell them. It's your story. It is important to use different types of images if you want to create the right pacing for your story. You can choose from wide shots, medium shots, a detailed shot, a close-up shot, a portrait shot, or a shot showing your subject in action. Your subject should not, or your photograph should not be redundant. How many times, especially now with digital, when we can just press the button, do we end up with 1,000 pictures that look exactly the same? Choose the photos that you will use and exclude those that do not add to anything significant to the overall effect you want to create. Not every photo you take needs to be used to tell your story. So here, again, I was at a rodeo and took a whole lot of pictures. I don't need to use every one of those pictures to tell my rodeo story. Okay? Again, a variety of shots. You might choose to shoot the wide shot. You might want a medium shot. You might want a detail shot. It's up to you. And sometimes, again, we might use them all. Make sure that your first photo will immediately draw viewers into the story. A good story has to start well. Your first image should be compelling and should invite curiosity. Take note of the lighting. Remember, going back to those 5 Ps. Take note of the lighting and its effect on your shot. The type of lighting you use will add to the mood that you want to create. If you want dramatic effects, go for low-key lighting. Use colors or colored lighting. Back to color. We should have communicated on this. It worked perfectly. If you want to emphasize the mood of your subject. So again, low-key lighting creates a certain feel to our photograph. Okay, low-key lighting, beautiful lighting on that little girl's face and how she stands up. She has that glow to her. Okay, and again, color. Color is great. It really pops and brings our attention. When color is about the subject, it works very well. Line, we got great line going on as well. Framing is another important element. How about that, Christine? As mentioned earlier, you should be able to identify which object needs to be excluded or included in your shot. And going back to the little child story, if you choose to show the full shot of the child holding to his parent's hand instead of a mere detail of a medium shot of their hand, you will get a different effect and your viewers will likewise see it differently. So again, rather than just little hands, now it's that real close interaction, okay? Using framing, directing your viewer's attention into that picture. Using the framing technique, it's always a great way to emphasize the subject. And I think this is it. Experiment with angles. Which angle or angles best communicates what you want to say? Take test shots from multiple angles to determine this. We get lazy as photographers. We walk up to something and that's how we take the picture. Get down low, get up high, stand on a chair, a table, change that. When shooting outdoors, try to keep the sun behind you or at your side. We saw what happened to that one soldier, that Civil War reenactor when the light was hitting them. Not very flattering. Okay, so again, good use of color, good use of pattern, good use of line, good use of shadow. Good use of shadow because it's that depth in the picture. We feel that it goes on forever. Strong side lighting, good use of color palettes, lines in our picture. If you are captioning your photos, this is good for those of you that are entering contests. Be sure that you have the right location and the name of your subject, if needed. It might also be important to take note of what the subjects were doing. Although, if it's a good photograph, you shouldn't really need to give it all away, right? And also your caption should be short and clear. Remember to keep it simple. How about that? Okay. Should I quit there?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. I could talk forever. I've been talking for 7 hours.
It's a shame you don't get excited about this. Really appreciate you filling it. Somebody want to catch the lights back there? And I'll go get the tickets for the door prizes. 9018. Very good. Dash on up there and get a door prize. Go ahead.